Women do not have the calmness of temperament or the balance of mind to exercise judgment in political affairs.
Romola Garai and Abi Morgan.
When writing a screenplay based on historical event, what is important to consider whilst balancing factual accuracy and the need to create compelling narrative?
It's a tricky balance, but I don't really necessarily treat them any differently if I'm creating a factual character or a fictional character, because ultimately I think it's an act of creation. You know, I wasn't there at the time, and you know, I know certainly with this film what was interesting for us is we looked at all the working class women in that area at the time, and we tried to create these composites of real women to create the fictional character of Maud, and certainly Edith Ellen and Alice's character played by Romola. And when you're making a film that has a budget of 14 million, which is about 10 million pounds, which sounds a lot, but if you think about a film like Pan, which cost 200 million to be made, and we have 4 or 5 huge set pieces, often things like budgetary restrictions make you have to pull back and make you have to rearrange. So you're always cutting your cloth. For me, it's always about trying to serve the compelling nature of the storytelling in terms of drama, but also trying to give a proper nod to history and make it appropriate, but it also has to feel relevant. So essentially you're constantly making that story work for yours more than making yourself work for history, if that makes sense.
Romola, your character was, I imagine, extremely interesting to play because she was in a position of being divided between two camps. Was it a difficult role to take on?
Yeah, it was difficult, but difficult is always interesting in my world. Mm-hmm. So if you have challenges, you're always thrilled. You know, the great thing about the research that I did for Alice and talking to Sarah and Abi about her and how they wanted her played was that it was important to show that for women of the political class whose husbands, fathers, families were allied with political groups, they felt that they could involve themselves in the movement up to a point. Yeah. But Alice has children and she cannot, or feels she cannot push herself beyond that point. I think what's so important about the choice that Abi made to make Maud the central character is that this is a woman who has no safety net. She has nothing, and she loses everything for it, and that's why it's such a good dramatic choice to make Maud the central character.
That was an incredible film. I thought it was stunning, and I really liked how we were pulled into the movement just like the main character Maud did. But something that I have to say I was particularly disappointed about in the film was the lack of women of colour. And I did my research. In terms of the suffragette movement, there were incredible Asian women that were helping hand in hand with women like Maud, for example. They funded a lot of the movement. If you were to film this again, or if there was something that you could change about suffragette, would that be something? And
it's a really good question. I think one of the issues is I think the two women that you're talking about in terms of funding it are Princess Sophia Duleep Singh and Bikjami Karma. Both very, very significant women in the movement, but both of them were aristocratic. I think the bigger element about the diversity in the UK at the time, and I would love to know about your research that you've done genuinely, and I'd love to see some photographic evidence, because I could only find one photograph at that time of women of colour within the movement, and those were a group of women who were protesting for women's rights, but also about independence in India. But what was difficult for us is that we couldn't find the level of diversity in that area of London that we were focusing our film, and we trawled through everything. It's been very intriguing, difficult, complex, but I don't think we should not have the conversation.
What changes did you make to the script, and do you feel those changes were for the better or for the worse?
I didn't make any changes to the script.
So I think, did you not change lines? You know what you're like.
I usually do. Yeah.
Writing is rewriting. You know, you don't just do one draft and everyone goes, it's brilliant, I'm going to fund it. Do it. So this film's probably gone through about 30, 40 drafts. There's always things that you love, and there's always things that you miss, you know, and there are always things that can be a combination of budgetary cuts, that can be because on the day this scene just didn't work, that can be when you come to edit it together, it's a brilliant scene, but actually it kills the end of the film because you've already seen a similar performance, or that scene's repeating itself. But ultimately, I think what's been wonderful about this movie is it's not really about the film anymore, it's about the conversations around it. It's about conversations about women in the industry, it's about conversations and diversity in the industry, and if we're having those conversations, then I'm really, really glad we should be having them. So,
do you think that this film will hopefully be really impactful in terms of women in the film industry?
One of the things about doing a film and making a film that has women at its core is we're saying to the world, these are the stories we want to tell, and these are the stories are important, and we need to vote with our cinema ticket. You know, we need to go to these films to say, yeah, we want to see more of these films. You know, women make up 51% of the cinema buying public, and yet it doesn't quite correlate to the material that's coming through. And so, you know, for me, just writing not just one woman, I wrote 4 or 5 really strong women, and that was really exciting to be able to do that. And it was really exciting to see that on set, and it was really exciting to write the male roles as supporting roles.
And I think a lot of women who are creative, and there are maybe some creative women here today, there's a strong societal push to become actresses. And don't get me wrong, I love acting, it's a great job, but the film industry has thousands of jobs in it. There are endless employment opportunities in the industry, but for some reason there is if you show creative potential and you're female, I think people are sort of led towards the performance aspect of it, when in fact it's an industry with incredible potential for creative people in many, many other roles.
Okay, well, I think we'd like to give the guys a huge round of applause and a thank you for coming
Seeing this movie actually gave me a historical insight to what was Britain in the 1920s, especially for women.
Well, I think the Q&A is so important because it's all good and well seeing the film because that's a polished version of it, but you know, getting the chance to speak to the screenwriter or Romola, I think is really important because you get to see the process of it, which I think is so important in a film and something that you need to know what kind of thought process went into it to produce the final thing.
Whilst I was watching the Suffragettes, I felt I could connect in some ways with a few of the characters because I was just right here watching it, and I just think it's something I've got a great interest in, so I think whilst watching it in the cinema I felt I kind of felt the emotions more than what I would do at home.